Hey everybody, welcome back to Midas Letter Live. Today we have Vic Neufeld, the CEO and founder, co-founder of Aphria Inc., trading on the TSX under the symbol APH. We're interested in fielding questions from our audience in an effort to induce engagement. And so we have a gentleman named Ian Hendry who wants to know, sounds like a good question to me, what is the output of Aphria combined now outside of Canada?
Output as in harvest?
Yeah. Is anything going on internationally yet in terms of what you're producing?
Absolutely zero.
Okay.
But if that's a segue into a little more clarity on our international strategy.
Let's go there.
Yeah. I think as we press released a week and a half ago, Lesotho and its abilities of growing both hemp and cannabis outdoor in a little kingdom embedded in the middle of South Africa and moving the processing of oil extraction through GMP facilities there. That will be capable of probably somewhere around 50,000 keys a year. But that's a moving target number. If you can understand, there's lots of land and labor is very, very, very cheap. So we have the ability to increase or decrease depending on the appetite of certain European countries that allow the importation through an EU GMP compliant facility, processing and laboratory. So today, there is no cultivation producing any harvest, but Lesotho is an example. Italy is another example. I can tell you that we're still but very close to making a decision whether it's Spain or Portugal. So there's a lot of dynamics happening. And one thing I think your viewers need to know is it's great to send out a press release that talks about license A, B, and C, or you've moved the needle on this joint venture or acquired this particular importer, distributor in a European country. The viewers have to know that that journey is far from bringing forth commercialization. There's a lot of other dominoes that need to fall. So I'm going to sit here and tell you, other than the few kilos being sold into Germany through the old system, the few kilos being delivered into Ireland, there is no what I call material commercialization of cannabis in these countries. They are still behind the needle of where Canada is yesterday, let alone today.
Right, right. Interesting. Okay, so then in terms of the cost of cannabis going into this future scenario where you're talking about the competition on the balance sheet is going to be the key to survival for these companies. What would you say to a company that's just coming to the market now with an initial phase 1, 50,000 square feet of grow space where they've got a license, they've got some money, and they're going to try to, find a round hole to drive their square peg into and carve out some space? What are the chances that those companies are going to become contenders by opportunistically identifying something in the whole food chain?
Wow. There is a place for good quality craft growers. I think they'll be excluded for round 1 of SAQ because Quebec has already wired their 6 LPs. I think in Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, the Maritimes, I know where we're at. I can't disclose because I haven't press released yet, but I know exactly where our allocations lie, and we're very excited about what we're getting. But they're going to be favoring local, I call it provinciality, just like Hydropothecary got a few more kilos than I did in Quebec. There's a couple of really, really good craft growers in New Brunswick, for example. And anyways, my point is, if you're in a province where they absolutely will demonstrate some favoritism, they have a place. But when it comes to Ontario, from what we've been led to believe, the door's open. They're not limiting, the footprint of the store is going to be defined and linear feet, but the amount of brands they're going to allow in, they have not limited. So there are opportunities. But it's not about just getting listed with Ontario or Saskatchewan, Manitoba, which has their own unique go-to-retail strategy with private sector. It's about how do you get to market? how do you now, it's great to be the cultivator, vertically integrated, you've processed, you'd oil extract, you've even created the wireframing of what your rec brand or brands look like.
Sure.
But now how do you get it in? So as you read last week, our contract relationship with Southern Glacier is exactly what forward-thinking LPs need to think of. How do you now execute at street level? Do you hire your army of people?
Right.
Or do you seek the services of the experts serving existing liquor control boards across the country?
Yeah.
So to that extent, I'm saying there are craft guys that they've done all the right check boxes. Their next hurdle is going to be what I've just entered into. Wow, how do we now get there? How do we have people, feet on the street, as they say, into stores to educate, to brand aware? Well, I'm suggesting, because of who and what we've arranged with Southern Glacier, that we're more than welcome to entertain thoughts of the craft guys. Again, got a great business model, good growers, integrity of management. They have their idea of who they want to be from a brand perspective. Listen, I'm going to take the rest of the headache off you. So call me. We're open in terms of very selectively adding 2 or 3 of these craft opportunities because we have Southern Glacier.
Interesting.
And they're coast to coast.
So Southern Glacier, I mean, we've got your press release up on the screen right now about that. So I was curious, I mean, so is that essentially capturing their captive distribution channels for your products into all liquor stores, all cold beer and wine stores, depending on what the licensing is across the country?
Southern Glacier brings the advantages of street execution. It's more than just having economic order quantities and reviewing distribution centers of inventory they have and forward projections. It's much deeper than that. It's going in store. It's rather than me having an army of educators and trainers, quote, store ambassadors, we now are using their infrastructure and their relationships. What needs to be understood is if you're not listed in the central registry of province A, B, or C, you're never going to be on the shelf of any retailer in province-wide.
Right.
So for us to bring this relationship, this expertise, and credibility that what they say they're going to do, they perform. Just like Aphria, what we say we're going to perform. So together we're going forward, and have we increased the level of receptiveness at province by province from liquor control boards who have cannabis boards, but the governance model is in Ontario, for example, LCBO?
Yep.
Absolutely. What does that mean? Shelf presence.
Right.
Shelf preference of presence. Again, I want to be eye level. I don't want to be kick plate. I don't want to be the dustpan.
Right.
New products, new brands as we introduce going forward. Like out of the box, we'll have 3/maybe 4 brands. We haven't unveiled them all, but going forward, how do you evolve and have greater brand penetration when vape pens come? So if you have the expertise and the relationships that I've built inside of Aphria, but what Southern Glacier brings to the table, I think we have the ears of the regulators in many provinces to the extent it's in Ontario, for example, again, is LCBO.
Right. Okay, so that's Canada. Now, another recent announcement talks about Colombia, and you've signed an agreement with a Colombian-based company to supply medical cannabis in Colombia. I saw a Colombian LP go public yesterday, Chiron Life Sciences. They are growers in Colombia as well. Are you going to make the sort of Aphria marketplace available to these Colombian growers, or is it more that you're selectively partnering with single unique names within those countries and going to drive everything in that country through that name?
So using Colombia as the benchmark on this conversation, Colombia was to us a very logical extension of who and what we're doing in Argentina already with local partners there, APB. And for us, Colombia is a huge population. CBD is already like an OTC product, and THC infused products are scripted by doctors. So there is an existing marketplace there, and people really need to understand this is not 2 years down the road commercialization. This is real stuff, like right now. Yeah. So what we've done, and it's about people. I can tell you about the strength of our C-suite in Leamington and here in Toronto, but in Columbia, who's there? Who are the leaders that are going to make it happen? And yes, we've reached out through, again, another intermediary on the right people who are going to manage the cultivation. And our cultivation, by the way, is up in the coffee lands. Okay. So it's Juan Valdez sort of, right. of concept. Sure. And many reasons for that, and I won't belabor that. But in the meantime, it's allowing the importation of the Aphria brand into Colombia. And then once cultivation and they build the infrastructure of oil processing, both supercritical CO2 and ethanol, do the packaging and in market through clinics and pharmacies. Very similar to the vertical integration of who Canada is medically. Mm-hmm. So for us, this is a quick entry using the Aphria brand, subject to the supply agreement, and working on a licensing agreement. Again, very similar to what we're doing in Argentina, which, by the way, they're now talking about in-country cultivation. Mm-hmm. So I'll be down there shortly and talking about with the Ministry of Agriculture, not Ministry of Health, on building out a series of greenhouses for their R&D purposes, but also how do we now make this commercialization. So Argentinians, all CBD derived, so this would be our Treasure Island again at 15% CBD, just driving the needle on the type of chronic conditions that Argentina Department of Health has accepted, and the first out of the box is epileptic seizure control. Right.
Once again, thanks so much for the input. I'm sure our audience really appreciates it, and I certainly do too. Yep.